Добро пожаловать на мой канал. Спасибо за внимание сегодня утром. Today for you, I have a very special live stream, which, so American police officers are hated all over the world. All over the world, everyone hates not only the United States, but especially American police officers. So, American police officers literally have so much blood on their hands. And tourists, Canadian tourists, British tourists, German tourists, people from all over the world who have interacted with American police officers know what pig-headed, corrupt, dirty liars they are. And so there was an incident. Well, there's been many incidents actually. And something interesting too, I noticed something about this incident that was pulling up. Now, I was aware of this incident for several years ago, and I did do a video on it on my channel. But this video that I did was about a year ago, and it didn't really get much traction. So now I'm doing a live stream version of this to show it off. Because I noticed that my live streams get more views typically than my videos. So, but if you are interested, you could also check out the video that I made about the British sailors who were arrested and beaten and assaulted and humiliated by American police officers. So, first off, the obvious I want to point out, Mr. Americans, hello Americans. Do you think that maybe you shouldn't beat up, especially you shouldn't beat up anyone? I mean, American police officers, even if it's like a Russian spy from Russia or a gay Canadian tourist from Canada, American police officers, you really shouldn't beat up anyone. But especially, you might not want to beat up British Navy sailors on one of the biggest British warships, America was supposed to be allies with the United States. America was supposed to be allies with Britain. America's not even allies with themselves, actually. So, yeah, the United States isn't allies with America. But no, seriously, the United States, it was supposed to be allies with Britain, and you really think that your allies, your British allies, are gonna defend you after you beat them up? Now look, listen, I'm not defending criminals, but these guys were drunk, okay? And British sailors, if you know British guys, they get drunk. And they're like German soldiers, they get drunk. Could you not have handled this a bit more delicately, like giving them a pass, saying, hey, they're British sailors, they work hard, they play hard, they're drunk? This is what drunk people do. But hold on, let me make something clear here. They didn't actually break the law. They were arrested for being publicly intoxicated. Wait, hold on. Before you say, well, that's breaking the law, being publicly intoxicated. They weren't doing anything. There's a lot of people who are publicly, everyone who goes to a bar, who drinks at a bar, gets publicly intoxicated. The point is that you don't drive drunk, and they didn't. They didn't drive drunk. You don't beat people up, and they didn't. They were merely arrested for being drunk in public. Do you understand? Do you understand? That could be an arrest warrant. That could be charged for half of America. That's like arresting someone for jaywalking. That's like arresting someone, especially for jaywalking when there's no cars on the road and there's like, it's like miles and miles. You know what I mean? Like that's arresting someone for jaywalking on a totally empty, deserted street. So just to arrest someone for being drunk in public, everyone at a bar, everyone at a party gets drunk. But if the drunk people don't act on being drunk, if they don't drink and drive, which of course they shouldn't drink and drive, and they didn't, these British sailors weren't drinking and driving. If they don't beat anyone up, and they didn't, these British sailors weren't beating anyone up, then why are you gonna go and arrest someone? Okay, so we got some people coming in. So let's go to the comments. Jonathan Smith came in and said, that's actually a crime. What is actually a crime? Yeah, I said that public intoxication is a crime. I didn't deny that, but what I'm telling you is that first off, British sailors, when they go to a bar and they get drunk, if the bar is over serving British sailors and they get drunk, do you not also think that that's the bar's fault? Why aren't the American bar owners charged? Why aren't the bartenders at the American bar that overserve drinks to these British sailors? A drunk person is going to just keep making themselves drunk because they don't know when to stop ordering. That's what drunk people do. Alcoholics, alcoholics, they keep ordering until they get drunk. That's what alcoholics do. So isn't there also responsibility for the bartenders to stop serving these guys to say, "Hey, you've had enough"? Why aren't the American bartenders? Why weren't they charged? Why weren't they beat up? Why weren't they tasered by the American police? Now, listen, I'm not for giving people free passes, right? But let's look at it. Let's look at something here for a sec. These British Navy sailors, they work hard. They are will do one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. You know how dangerous it is to be on a Navy ship? You know how dangerous it is to be in a submarine or a Navy ship, to be in that line of work? It's dangerous. So if these guys want to blow off some steam and go to Florida and party and get drunk, I mean, do American police officers arrest every single American who gets drunk in public? If that's the case, then let me see it. Because I haven't seen it. There's been lots of Americans who've gotten drunk in public and they weren't arrested. But why does the American police, why do they like to pick and choose on foreigners? The American police, they love to pick on foreigners. The American police, they love to pick on Canadian tourists. The American police love to pick on British tourists. The American police love to pick on Russians and Chinese tourists. And then you guys wonder why all of these countries hate you. You wonder why all of these countries around the world hate your American guts when the American police are going around raping Japanese tourists, beating up British tourists, punching Canadian tourists in the face and then taking their money and then tasering them in the butt and telling them to go back to Canada. Like, do you Americans not realize that you have pissed off the whole world? The whole world wants revenge on America. Okay, let's go back to comments. I didn't say it was the bartender's fault. What I said was I said the bartenders also share responsibility because there's such a thing as over serving someone. And the bartenders are supposed to know, as the people who are not drinking, to say, hey, this alcoholic has had enough. We're not going to serve them anymore. Any more alcohol. They've had enough. And you can actually, but bartenders who overserve can give, it's called alcohol poisoning. So bartenders are not supposed to overserve because they could actually kill someone by over serving them alcohol, which is alcohol poisoning. So I said that the bartenders also shared responsibility for the problem because they're not supposed to overserve British sailors. But did the American bartenders get tasered and beat up and put in prison? No, they didn't. So once again, the American police are picking and choosing who they're and like okay, hey, hold on a sec. Hey, insider trading's a crime. Didn't Trump say just a few months ago or 6 months ago that he wanted to arrest Nancy Pelosi for insider trading? Did he? No. Insider trading's a crime. Insider trading, Nancy Pelosi has gotten away with billions in inside millions, billions in insider trading approximately. Why didn't the American police arrest Nancy Pelosi? But they're going to arrest British sailors who are just partying, having a good time. They're going to arrest these British sailors and beat them up and taser them, and they're just having a good time. So people who come in and be like, "Oh, public intoxication is a crime," even those British soldiers, those hardworking, muscular, tall, strong British soldiers, even though those tall, hardworking British soldiers, those muscular men, even though those British soldiers were drinking and they were publicly intoxicated, so they deserved. But wait a minute, if this is really about upholding the law, Then why wasn't Nancy Pelosi arrested for insider trading? Trump literally said 6, 7 months ago, approximately, that he wanted to arrest Nancy Pelosi for insider trading. Did he? No, he didn't. And he also made the same claims about Hillary Clinton, who is connected to Pizzagate. He also made the same. He called Hillary Clinton a nasty woman. He said, lock Hillary up. She needs to be in prison. Send Hillary to prison. He even said on stage that if he was president, he would put Clinton in prison. Did he? No. So all of these American politicians, they're getting away with the Epstein list. They're getting away with being rich white pedos. They're getting away with Pizzagate. They're getting away with insider trading. Why? Why are American politicians that's against the law. That's a crime. They're committing crimes. Why aren't the American police officers arresting these American politicians? But they're gonna go and arrest several British sailors, hardworking, strong, masculine British sailors, just because they decide to party too much. And which, by the way, they're not the only people in America who party too much. There's a lot of American college students that overdrink and party, and those guys don't get arrested. Heck, the American police, they'd never go to sleep if they were arresting every single American that was drinking and partying too much for public intoxication. They could be arresting all of those American college students for public intoxication. Do they? No, because what they do is they pick and choose. The American police, they pick and choose where they're going to enforce the law. And you would think that Hillary Clinton, who's connected to Pizzagate and who's connected to Epstein Island, you'd think that Hillary Clinton would be the first on the list to be arrested, but no. And even Trump even said that he wanted to arrest her. Did he? Did Trump arrest Hillary Clinton? No. Did Trump arrest Nancy Pelosi? No. Trump didn't arrest half these rich elite politicians that he promised he was going to arrest. So they broke the law. They committed a crime. Why aren't they being arrested? But instead, you're going to go beat up British sailors who defend you, British Navy sailors who are supposed to be your allies. No wonder the Russian Navy ships, no wonder the Russian nuclear submarines were able to creep up on America lately. Because why would the British Navy defend you Americans after you beat them up? After you attack them and humiliate them and beat them up? And put them in an American prison and then strip search them naked and make them take their clothes off, really embarrassingly make them take their clothes off and strip search them and then make them bend over when they're butt naked. And then you do this to British soldiers. You embarrass the British Navy, and then you Americans actually expect the British Navy to defend you? Why would the British Navy defend you after you beat up their soldiers, after you beat up the British Navy? You think they're just going to forget what you did to them? And even though this was 7, 8 years ago, this incident, you think the British Navy sailors are just going to forget that you American police officers, dirty American cops, beat up and humiliated British Navy soldiers, sailors who were just trying to have a good time, who were just partying. They weren't intending to break the law. They weren't intending to get drunk. I mean, that's what happens when people drink. They get drunk. That's what happens when alcoholics drink. They get drunk. Okay? They were partying. They were having a good time. They had no bad intentions. They had no intention to break the law. Just like people who jaywalk. Jaywalking is against the law, but you don't see everyone arresting everyone who jaywalks because everyone knows that when you're walking down the street and there's no cars around and there's not a crosswalk for miles, are you really gonna walk miles for the next crosswalk? That's insane. You'd be put in a mental asylum if you did that. People who would actually walk miles just to get to the next crosswalk, even though that there's no cars around, it's a completely empty road. So people constantly every day are jaywalking, and those people aren't arrested. In fact, I've seen American police officers jaywalking. In fact, I've seen American police officers speeding. I've seen American police officers texting on their phone while they're driving. And I've also seen American police officers being publicly intoxicated. And were they arrested? Did the American police officers arrest themselves? No, they did not. But instead, they choose to beat up British Navy sailors. And then you Americans wonder why the Russians are like able to why are the Russian nuclear submarines so easily able to sneak up on you Americans in the water in the ocean? Hey, why are those Russian submarines able to so easily sneak up on Americans in the water? Aren't the British Navy supposed to be watching out for the Russian submarines? Oh, you mean the same British Navy sailors that you American police officers beat up and humiliated and tasered and attacked and humiliated and beat up and strip searched and made them bend over butt naked and then spread their butt cheeks and embarrassed and humiliated? Though you expect those British Navy sailors to defend you Americans after you did this to them? And it wasn't just them. This is just one of many cases. This is just one of many cases. There were cases where American police officers raped a Japanese woman. And then that Japanese woman, she went back to Japan. But you think that that Japanese woman who went back to Japan after she was raped by American police officers, you think she just forgot about it and that she doesn't and you don't think that this doesn't affect your relationship between America and Japan? It's bad enough America dropped two nukes on Japan. It's bad enough America dropped two nuclear bombs on Japan. Now you're going around, the American police are going around, they're raping Japanese women. Jesus Christ. No wonder all these countries hate your American guts. Okay, let's go to the comments. Back to the comments. Someone came in, let's go to the comments. Someone came in and said, Samuel Rutkowski came in and said, this article also says nothing about public intoxication. It says drunk and disorderly. Um, there were many articles about this incident. So if you just Google search British sailors arrested in Jacksonville, Florida, if you just arrested American cops beat up British sailors, you'll find many articles. There were many articles reporting on this. So I'm just showing you one of articles. I can't show you obviously all the articles within the same live stream. I would be here forever. But there were many different articles. There were even BBC articles. There were British versions of this article. So you could read what the British had to say, which is very interesting. And then there's even the Russians who got a hold of this, who were laughing their asses off, which I would be too. The Russians were laughing their asses off when they saw what happened between America and Britain, who are supposed to be allies. America and Britain are supposed to be allies. So of course the Russians were we were laughing. The Russians were laughing their asses off when they saw what happened between the British Navy sailors and American police officers. So there's all different versions of this article. So, like I said, you can just go read yourself. But one thing I would like to point out is that another thing people don't realize is that Canada and Britain, we are still connected. We share a queen, or we used to share a queen. She died mysteriously. I don't know who did it. Probably the Chinese. Anyways, someone killed the queen. Anyways, the queen is dead. But Canada and Britain, we are still connected. The queen is on our money, on our Canadian money. So when American police officers beat up British soldiers, this doesn't just affect your relationship with America and Britain. This also affects your relationship with America and Canada. Because Canada, we listen to what the British people tell us to do. Okay? We listen to the crown. The Canadian government, the government of Canada, we are still connected to the Queen, and even though she's dead, you know what I mean? We're still connected to the royal family. We're still connected to the British government. The government of Canada, the British government, we're still like connected. So not only did American police officers beating up British Navy sailors, not only did this affect America's relationship with Britain, but this also affected America's relationship with Canada. because Canada, we gotta be like, we gotta kind of work with our British allies a bit. So if our British allies they come fuming at us and they say, "Oh, those Americans, don't help," so we're kind of caught in the middle, Canada. Canada, we're caught in the middle between Britain and America. We're caught in the middle between China and Russia. I mean, Canada, we're caught in the middle. So, anyways, let's go back to comments. So someone came in and said allies doesn't mean shit. Follow the law. Nancy Pelosi been breaking the law. She been doing insider trading. Trump said he was going to arrest her. Did he? No. Nancy Pelosi has been defrauding the American people and the world because insider trading affects the stock market, which affects the world. She's literally ripping everyone off. Like she's screwing over everyone, Nancy Pelosi, with her insider trading. And Donald Trump gave a speech several months ago where he said that he wanted to prosecute Nancy Pelosi for insider trading. Did he? No, he didn't. He hasn't. He also said he was going to prosecute Hillary Clinton. He literally, his campaign promise when he was running for president the first time was he said, lock her up. All of these Americans, we saw it from Canada. We saw it from Canada. All of these Americans were chanting, lock her up, lock up Hillary. Hillary Clinton's a nasty woman. Hillary Clinton's part of Pizzagate. Hillary Clinton's connected to Epstein Island. And did they lock Hillary Clinton up? No. Donald Trump was on stage in a debate stage debating Hillary Clinton. This was a very public debate, which Canada, of course, we saw. We saw Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump debating each other on the debate stage. And then Donald Trump made a joke saying if he was president, he would send Hillary Clinton to prison. He would lock her up. And then sure enough, Trump was president. Did he lock her up? No, he didn't. So if this is truly about upholding the law, then if that's the case, then half of these American politicians, actually probably all of them, probably 99% of these American politicians would be locked up. So if this was really about upholding the law, then most of these American politicians would be locked up and the American police would be locked up too. Because I constantly see American police officers, they are speeding, they are beating up innocent people. Like there's YouTube videos all over YouTube of American police officers texting while they're driving, speeding. There's YouTube videos of American police officers drunk and publicly intoxicated, and they're not arresting themselves. The American police aren't arresting themselves. And these American politicians like Nancy Pelosi, who get away with insider trading, they're not being arrested, even though Trump clearly acknowledged that she's been breaking the law for a long time. So if this was really about upholding the law, then why are you picking on British sailors who are just partying, having a good time? These British sailors are just partying, having a good time. You're picking on them, but you're not arresting freaking Nancy Pelosi, who freaking defrauded the world with her insider trading schemes, who screwed over everyone on the stock market. You're not arresting Hillary Clinton, who even Trump and everyone acknowledged is part of the Pizzagate scandal. Hillary Clinton is part of the Epstein Island scandal. Like rich white pedos, Hillary Clinton's connected to the rich white pedos. So you're going to arrest a British Navy sailor who was just partying, having a good time, who got drunk. You're going to arrest him and beat him up and taser him and make him bend over, spread his butt cheeks, and make the British Navy sailors strip naked. You're going to make the British Navy sailors strip naked and bend over and then taser them and put them in prison and humiliate British Navy soldiers. You're going to do this to them. But Americans, the American president, Donald Trump, literally admits that Hillary Clinton belongs in prison. He admits that Nancy Pelosi belongs in prison. He admits that half these journalists, these who spew the fake news, belong in prison. Because these journalists who spew fake news, they destroy people's lives. These journalists destroy people's lives. And have these journalists been arrested? No. Has Nancy Pelosi been arrested? No. Has Hillary Clinton been arrested? No. So many Americans who are guilty of so much crap have not been arrested, have not been put in jail. And what about Anthony Fauci, the doctor who was part of the COVID scandal? Anthony Fauci, was he arrested? Was he put in prison? And if he was put in prison, he was probably released right away. He was probably like so these all of these rich elite politicians, all of these war criminals, all of these American psychopaths, they're getting free passes or they're even if they are arrested, they're getting slaps on the wrist. There's Americans who probably got away with murder. Okay, there's Americans who probably got a slap on the wrist for murder. Meanwhile, you have these British Navy sailors who are just partying, having a good time, and then the American police beat up the crap out of them, arrest them, humiliate them, strip them naked, make them bend over, spread their butt cheeks, British sailors, and then you honestly expect the American people actually expect the British sailors, the British Navy to defend you in the sea and in the ocean, you actually expect to be defended in the ocean. I think I think it's pretty obvious why the Russian submarines, the nuclear submarines, I'm pretty sure it's pretty obvious why the Russian nuclear submarines are so easily able to sneak up on Americans these days. Because the British Navy, every time that they're supposed to like be called to defend America, they're gonna remember. They don't forget. They don't forget something like that. British Navy sailors don't forget when they were arrested, beat up, and tasered just for trying to party, have a good time, getting drunk. They won't forget being strip searched, being made to take their clothes off, humiliated, having to be stripped naked, and then all the American police officers laughing at the naked British bodies. British soldiers don't forget that. They don't forget having to bend over, spread their butt cheeks, how humiliating that would have been for British soldiers. They don't forget something like that. The Japanese woman that was raped by American police officers, she don't forget. Japan don't forget. The British soldiers won't forget that. These are people's America's allies. If America's doing this to their allies, like just no wonder Russia. No wonder Russia and China hate America's guts. If this is the way America treats their own allies, if this is the way America treats their own allies, imagine no wonder why America has all these enemies. No wonder why no just imagine what America must have done to Russia and China for Russia and China to hate America's guts. So these people don't forget. They don't forget. British sailors don't forget. Japanese women don't forget. All of these people don't forget. Mexicans from Mexico don't forget. All of these people around the world, the Germans don't forget. Okay, none of these people forget. The Koreans, the North Koreans, I want to hear their side of the story. Okay, given what we now know about what the United States has done to all these other countries, I want to hear the North Korean side of the story. I want to hear all of these countries' side of the story. I want to hear Japan's side of the story. I want to hear Germany's side of the story. I want to hear Britain's side of the story. I want to hear all of these countries. I want to hear Russia's side of the story. So let's go back to comments. So someone came in, Robin Wycliffe, Wackoff? How do you, I don't know how to say your name, I'm sorry. How do you say Wickoff? I think it's Wickoff. Okay, Robin Wickoff came in and he said the US Navy is 5 times bigger than the UK Navy. That's true, but Britain has a strong influence over the European Union. Britain and the UK, the United Kingdom, Britain, the European Union, they're all connected. And sure, the British Navy by itself may be no match compared to the American Navy. But when the British Navy and the British government, they, influence the entire European continent, the entire continent of Europe, which includes Germany, which includes France, which includes Poland and Switzerland and Sweden and right? Suddenly now the European Navy altogether combined, that might be a match for the United States. The European Navy, like if you take the European Union altogether, which includes the German Navy, the Italian Navy, the British Navy, the Swedish Navy, if you take them all together, the European Union, suddenly now the European Navy altogether, especially the Greeks, the Greeks in Greece, they have a strong navy. The Greeks have a strong navy. So if you take all of them together, suddenly I don't think that the American Navy can laugh at the European Navy because the European Navy combined, the Greek Navy combined with the German Navy, the Italian Navy, the British Navy, that's a navy altogether, you know. So you don't want to piss off the British people because the British people, like, they got a lot of influence over the rest of Europe. And it's not like Europe already liked America to begin with. It's not like France and Germany and Italy and Spain. It's not like those people were already diehard America fans to begin with. So it's not that hard for British government. It's not that hard for the British government to, like, hey, say, hey, everyone, do you hate those Americans? It's not hard for the British government to sway the European people against America. The European people weren't like fond of America to begin with, in case you didn't notice. In case you didn't notice, the European government, the European Union, the European people, they weren't fond of America to begin with, in case you didn't notice. So it wouldn't be that hard for Britain, the British Navy, the British sailors to sway, and the British government to sway the people of Europe against America. So that's why you don't want to piss off the British Navy. Okay, let's go back to comments. Well, many reasons why you don't want to piss off the British Navy because the British Navy, like they were supposed to be helping defend America in the ocean against Russia. You think the British Navy is going to defend you now after what you did to them? Or they're not going to defend you very well, at least. Okay, let's go back to comments. Yeah, so someone came in. His name is Wouldn't You Like to Know? His name's Wouldn't You Like to Know? And he said, Estonian Navy is scary AF, you know. They are scary. The Estonian, that's what I'm talking about. There's many navies in Europe that are very strong. The Greek Navy is very strong. Apparently. I did some research and apparently in Greece, the Greek people, they have a strong navy, apparently. So you don't want to piss off Europe. You don't want to piss off Britain. You don't want to piss off these people who are supposed to be your allies. So let's talk about, okay, The Diplomat. There's a TV show called The Diplomat. It's on Netflix. It's a new show. It's called The Diplomat. Now, listen, I'm not, I don't take all my information from TV sources. No, that's not the case at all. And I don't believe everything that television says, okay? Like when I watched, 9/11 happened, I kept thinking, did the Americans do this to themselves? Like, was this an inside job, right? So I don't just watch everything on television and take it, I take everything I see with a grain of salt, right? But The Diplomat, what's really cool about the Diplomat show on Netflix is it shows these different relationships. Like it gives you details and facts too about like relationships that America has with Britain, relationships America has with Russia, the relationship America has with China and Iran. So The Diplomat, which is a good show on Netflix, it's good because even though it's not like it's semi-fiction, I mean, it's semi-fiction, but they actually show like the real White House. They show pictures of the CSIS. They show pictures of the real British intelligence service. So they show real locations, and they do talk about real protocol. Like in certain episodes, they do discuss real protocol that the British intelligence service follows. So it's not like it's totally fiction. It's not like it's Harry Potter. It's not like it's the Lord of the Rings with some guy walking in Frodo, Frodo. It's not like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. Like even though The Diplomat, it's a political TV show and it's technically fiction, they do talk a lot about real world events. Like for example, I didn't know, and I found this out from watching The Diplomat. I didn't know that Scotland has all of the UK's weapons. I didn't know that. I didn't know that all of the United Kingdom's weapons, I didn't know that their whole nuclear arsenal, I didn't know that that was located in Scotland. I didn't know that. And I found this out from the watching The Diplomat, right? And this is a real fact. Like all of the United Kingdom's weapons, all of British weapons, they are in Scotland. They are located in Scotland. So this is especially why Scotland is not allowed to leave the UK, because Scotland has all of the British government's weapons, right? Nuclear weapons, nuclear arsenal. So that's what I'm saying. So obviously, I don't like people come in and be like, "Oh, that's a TV show." I know it's a TV show, but they still have facts. They still have information you learn from watching different shows like this. And it's funny too because sometimes I feel like these TV show producers, they want to leak, they have information that they want to leak, but they're not just going to go and they could commit treason, right? So if a TV show producer, if they just like go on their social media and start revealing American secrets on their social media, obviously that would be treason. Obviously, if American TV show producers or whoever is producing this TV show, it might very well be the Russians. Like this Diplomat TV show on Netflix, it might very well be Russian propaganda. Who knows? But who's ever producing these TV shows, obviously, if they just went on social media and just told American secrets, that would be treason. But what they do now, these TV show producers are starting to do, or they've been doing actually for a while, because I've discovered a lot of interesting things in American TV shows. What they'll do is they'll weave it into a storyline. They'll weave secrets. Actually, and they have actually a really good ability. The TV show producers, they have a good ability of making people come to the conclusion on their own, right? So they have the way that they weave it into the story, they have a really good ability. The TV show producers are able to convince people and persuade people and make people come to their own conclusions. So if an American TV show producer wants, for example, for just an example, to make people come to the conclusion that 9/11 was an inside job, well, a lot of times these TV shows, especially when it was around 9/11, they had a really good way of presenting facts in an episode that suddenly leads people to the end of the episode, suddenly thinking 9/11 was probably an inside job, right? So just that's just an example. But the diplomat doesn't talk about 9/11. I was just using 9/11 as an example. But the diplomat, like there's a lot of like I didn't know that Scotland had all of the UK's weapons. I found that out from watching The Diplomat. I found out some other interesting things from watching The Diplomat. I found out some interesting things about Russia watching The Diplomat. Found out some interesting things watching about Americans and how that they run the government, right? The White House. I found out interesting stuff about the White House watching The Diplomat. So I recommend that show because it really does wake people up to what's going on in the world. And I also like the fictional part of it because even the fictional part, like these are real people. Like they show these people as real people. They're not like some fake noble heroic hero. These people aren't heroes. Real life people, they're not like these noble heroic people like we expect them to be. You know, a lot of these, like for example, in the TV show The Diplomat, she literally uses her position as the ambassador to leverage a job to be vice president. So this is the kind of stuff they do in American politics. They abuse their positions of power, and they don't care about innocent lives. They care about getting promotions. They care about getting the next big career jump and getting, so in The Diplomat, literally, like she's not some heroic ambassador who wants to defend America. She's more like some social climber who's trying to just advance her career and do whatever it takes to get a promotion. And sure enough, she goes from being ambassador to the United States or to Britain. It was either Britain, it was ambassador to the United States for Britain. She goes from being ambassador to the United States for Britain to suddenly now she's about to become vice president. So this is exactly what they do in American politics. They're not like these noble people who actually care about innocent victims. They're all social climbers, they're greedy, they're corrupt. And that's an interesting because there's another TV show. Now this one's done by Canadians. That's my people. Another TV show called Wild Cards, which at the Wild Cards TV show, they have a whole episode where they're basically insinuating that there's this whole secret society in the United States like the Skull and Bones Society, where the judges, the Supreme Court judges and lawyers, Supreme Court, I think it was Supreme Court judges and other politicians, Supreme Court judges and politicians, they are apparently part of this secret society. It's like a Skull and Bones or some kind of society. It might not be exactly called Skull and Bones, but basically the Canadian episode of Wild Cards was basically trying to expose the Supreme Court judges in the United States, as insinuating they were part of some secret society. Really interesting. And I do believe that there are many secret societies in the United States. There's many, and so I do believe that the Supreme Court judges could be part of some secret society where they control the world. So, anyways, obviously it was a TV show and it was mostly fiction, but they have elements where they kind of tip the viewers off into what's going on in the world right now. So I was actually surprised that Canada has been taking shots like that at America. And of course, Wild Cards, the TV show Wild Cards. The other thing is, it's another cop show. It's another police officer drama where they portray American police officers as idiots. So it's another TV show. It's another TV drama where they show American cops as idiots and idiots. And it's from the same actor. It's the same actor, John Como something, Giacomo Giannotti or something. The same guy who was from Grey's Anatomy. And if you watch Grey's Anatomy, the TV show Grey's Anatomy, that show portrays doctors as incompetent idiots. So Grey's Anatomy, which is like an ABC TV show from the ABC network, Grey's Anatomy portrays doctors as idiots, and then the guy who played a doctor on Grey's Anatomy, who played an idiot doctor on Grey's Anatomy, now he's playing an idiot police officer. He's playing an idiot detective on Wild Cards, which is a Canadian TV series. So really interesting. These TV shows, these TV series. I think these TV show producers, they are leaking. Sometimes they're able to leak information. Like this is like this, and we all know what happened to Edward Snowden, right? Edward Snowden, when he leaked those classified American government files, when Edward Snowden leaked all that stuff, he had to get his butt out of the United States. He had to run to Russia, right? So, like, obviously, people are scared to just go on social media and just to leak secrets like that. So now what they're doing, these TV show producers, is they're finding interesting, creative ways to leak information in TV shows, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So. Doctors are incompetent. Someone came in and said, "Why don't you stop watching Grey's Anatomy and focus on reality?" The Grey's Anatomy doctors are actually better than real life doctors. Real life doctors are incompetent. Like real life, like the doctor who did my grandmother's surgery was an alcoholic. We could smell the alcohol on his breath. A Canadian doctor murdered my grandmother. My grandmother had breast cancer surgery, which now we're even questioning if, because now there's all of these herbal treatments for breast cancer. But of course, this Canadian doctor, he didn't recommend any herbal treatments for cancer. He wanted to do surgery. So this Canadian doctor did breast cancer surgery on my grandmother. She died shortly after the breast cancer surgery. And my mother and myself, when we went to go talk to the doctor who did the breast cancer surgery on my grandmother, he smelled of alcohol. He had alcohol, like he smelled of booze. My mother and me were shocked. We were talking to this doctor who just did the surgery a few days prior, breast cancer surgery on my grandmother, and he smelled like alcohol, like badly. He was an alcoholic, this doctor. And you think that an alcoholic doctor would have done the best surgery he could have done, best breast cancer surgery on my grandmother? And then sure enough, she died a few days after the breast cancer surgery. My grandmother died a few days after the breast cancer surgery. And then this alcoholic Canadian doctor was protected, of course, because the government of Canada, they protect their doctors. Because the government of Canada loves to say, oh, free healthcare. Canada has free healthcare. Canada socialism. Canada has free healthcare, and these Canadian doctors are so good. No, they're not. These Canadian doctors are awful. And the doctor who killed my grandmother was an alcoholic. And me and my mother, we were crying and depressed and distraught. Of course, after my grandmother died, after my mother's mother died, after her mother died, my grandmother died, and me and my mother, we were depressed and crying. And then we go to the hospital, we go to talk to the doctor who performed the breast cancer surgery on my grandmother, and he smelled of alcohol, like he was drunk. He was talking to us, and we could smell the alcohol in his breath. He was definitely an alcoholic. He was definitely an alcoholic, this Canadian doctor. And he got away with murdering my grandmother because, of course, the Canadian doctors, they all protect each other. And then my mother tried to, like, say, like, even though my mother was distraught that her mother died, my mother still tried to say something, is tried to say, hey, this was odd, like, and my mother was very calm about it, which is surprising. Like, my mother had just lost her mother, my mother's mother had died, and then my mother was really calm about it, but she did say something. She did say that, she did make a complaint to the hospital saying that the doctor smelled of alcohol, like he was smelled of alcohol, like really bad. And then, of course, the Canadian hospital, they defended their doctor like they always do. And there was another doctor too, which was not related to me. There's another doctor as well who's like not related to our case, what I'm saying. Not related to our case. So there's another doctor. Well, I did actually was at the hospital he worked at. I was a patient at the hospital he worked at. But anyways, there's another doctor, an Indian doctor who was convicted of molesting patients on the operating table. This was a Canadian Indian doctor. So this was an Indian Canadian doctor by the name of Dr. George Dude Not. So I did do two other live streams, and I showed his picture. I showed the news article, I showed his picture, I talked about him. So there are two other live streams on my YouTube channel where I show this doctor and the case. So this Indian doctor was convicted of molesting little white girls. He molested white women while they were unconscious, sedated on the operating table. And this Indian doctor got away with it for 20 years because even the Canadian news articles admit that the Canadian hospital engaged in a cover up, a major cover up. And they basically let this Indian doctor get away with molesting patients on the operating table. And of course, due to a publication ban, because publication bans are how the government of Canada, they cover stuff up with the publication bans. So there was a major publication ban, which actually, like, totally what didn't took off half the victims. So the publication ban went in, and there's way more victims. Like, this guy, he was an anesthesiologist for over 20 years. So you think that there's only going to be 20 victims after 20 years? Like one victim a year? You really think that an Indian doctor, an Indian anesthesiologist who works as an anesthesiologist for 20 years, that there's only going to be 20 victims? Like one victim per year, approximately, if we have to average it? No, there were way more victims. There were way more victims. But because of a publication ban, this is the government of Canada's way of downplaying what's something that happened. When the government of Canada, when the Canadian government, whenever they do something horrendous, they always try to downplay it. The media tries to downplay what they did. And so they did a publication ban to basically remove the majority of the victims. So if you read the article, it'll say like there's like 20 something victims. There were way more than 20 something victims. This guy was an anesthesiologist for 20 years. He did it to little white girls. He raped and molested little white girls while they were unconscious, while they were sedated under anesthesiology. Dr. George Dunot was an anesthesiologist, an Indian Canadian anesthesiologist in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And he also apparently was HIV. He had HIV. So he was even infecting patients with HIV. But of course, the government of Canada and the Canadian media, the Canadian news, they don't tell the full story and they downplay what the doctor did. And then on top of it, there's even more recent articles saying the Indian Canadian doctor was released from prison. Apparently, he only did a couple years in prison. There's Canadian journalists who get more time in prison for speaking out against communist China. there's Canadian journalists. There's Canadian journalists who get more prison time for just speaking out against communist China. And this Indian Canadian doctor who was an anesthesiologist who molested little white girls on the operating table, who molested white women on the operating table while they're unconscious and sedated. And there was a big hospital cover up for 20 years. Even the Canadian news article admits that the hospital engaged in a cover up. He only gets, what, a few years in prison? And then you know what they did? They tried calling the victims crazy. They called the little white girls crazy. They called the white women crazy. And this was going on for 20 years. And there's probably victims that don't even know that they were victims too, because, when people are unconscious, sedated, most people don't remember a thing, right? So Dr. George Dunot was an anesthesiologist. He would sedate the patients and make them unconscious prior to surgery. Prior to surgery, Dr. George Dunot, the anesthesiologist, would make patients sedated and unconscious. So these unconscious victims, these are just the victims that came forward are just victims that remembered something. There's probably a lot more victims that don't even remember that they were touched or molested while they were patients on the operating table by Dr. George Dunot, the Indian Canadian anesthesiologist. And you probably also saw that recent video where even the politicians, even the Canadian politicians are admitting that they screwed up by letting in all of these Indian immigrants. Canada has been invaded by Indian immigrants, and you probably saw, is his name Doug Ford? It's the brother of Rob Ford, right? So Rob Ford was the Toronto mayor that mysteriously died of cancer. So there was a Toronto mayor who was involved in a cocaine scandal. So there was a mayor from Toronto, Canadian mayor from Toronto, who was involved in a major cocaine scandal. And this was very public. It was Canada. Everyone was making jokes about it. It was Rob Ford. Even America, I think. Even Saturday Night Live. I think even Saturday Night Live made jokes about Rob Ford, the Toronto mayor who got caught in a cocaine scandal. He was actually really liked. People liked him because he kept taxes low. Even though he was a cocaine drug addict, he actually kept the taxes low in Toronto. So a lot of Torontonians liked him because even though he did cocaine, he kept the taxes low. Toronto had very low taxes while he was the mayor of Toronto. But then he mysteriously died from cancer. He also mysteriously died from cancer. And then his brother, Doug Ford, went into politics or was maybe already in politics. They look very similar. They look like brothers, actually. Doug Ford and Rob Ford. They look very similar. So then Doug Ford recently gave a whole speech in which he was condemning the immigrants, the Indian immigrants who have been destroying Canada, just like the Indian Canadian doctor who had been raping and molesting white girls and white women for years and getting away with it because the Canadian hospital covered up for him for years. So Canada obviously is not a perfect country either. But the criminals who are the Canadian politicians are the criminals. I mean, Doug Ford, I mean, he's basically trying to pretend to be the hero. He's the one who brought in all of these immigrants, all of these Canadian politicians, the Prime Minister of Canada. They go and complain about stuff that they caused so that they try to make themselves look like the heroes at the end. Justin Trudeau, the former Prime Minister of Canada, he brings in all of these immigrants into Canada, and then he complains about them at the end to try to make it look like as if he's against it. He's the one who caused it. Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, he's the one who caused the issue. Doug Ford, all of these Canadian politicians, they're the ones who caused all of these issues in Canada. And then they get up and complain about it as if they're against it. They're the ones who caused the issue. You see what they do? You see what these Canadian politicians, what liars they are? They go and they invade Canada. They make Canada invaded full of immigrants. And then these immigrants destroy Canada. And then the Canadian politicians can get up and say, oh, this was bad. This was a bad thing that you did. Yeah, that they're admitting something bad that they did. The Canadian politicians are complaining about stuff that they did. And then they're trying to make it look like heroes. Like, oh, they're against the immigrants. Really? You Canadian politicians, you're against the immigrants? Then why did you're the ones who allowed them to come to Canada? Canadian politicians are the ones who have the power The Canadian politicians are the ones who call the shots. They're the ones who allowed the immigrants to invade Canada and take over Canada. And now the Canadian politicians, like Doug Ford, he's giving a speech, making it look like as if he's against all the immigrants. He's the one who brought them here. These Canadian politicians, they brought all of the immigrants to Canada. So let's go back to comments anyway. Someone said something about fentanyl. I was just quickly going through the comments. I saw fentanyl. Yeah. So I'm not a drug addict. I don't do drugs. I'm very anti-drug. But Canada has been extremely affected by fentanyl poisoning. A lot of Canadians have died from fentanyl. And there was actually, I watched Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham, who's a Fox News correspondent, she's really funny, actually. I like Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham, Megan Kelly. But this was a Laura Ingraham episode. Laura Ingraham, the angle with Laura Ingraham on Fox News. She did a whole report saying about China, how China was bringing in fentanyl to the United States. China was trying to devalue the American currency, the American dollar. China was buying American land. You think it's acceptable for an enemy of the United States to go in and buy American land? Like, that's like in World War II. That's like if in World War II Nazi Germany. That's like if in World War II Nazi Germany just went into America and just bought half the land and like so Laura Ingraham, she like did a whole report calling out China for being the major cause of the fentanyl poisoning, the drug smuggling. They accused China of, Laura Ingraham accused China of buying American land. Laura Ingraham accused China of espionage. Well, China's always been doing espionage. I mean, China's known for espionage, so that's not shocking there. I wasn't shocked to find out about the espionage and the computer hacking. But what I was actually a bit kind of shocked to find out about was I didn't know that China was responsible for the fentanyl overdosing, the fentanyl poisoning. I didn't know China was behind that. Interestingly enough, so Canada is against the death penalty because so many people, Americans, Canadians, so many people have been wrongfully convicted. So that's why Canada is against the death penalty. And Canada abolished the death penalty. But that doesn't stop Canadian cops from killing people. They just shoot people. So rather than put someone on death row and make them go through due process and get the death penalty, Canada, if they want to kill someone, the Canadian police, they just shoot people. So I mean, Canada still kind of has the death penalty. It just they don't have like a formal process where people get due process. They get a trial, and then eventually after they get a trial, then they get the death penalty. No, in Canada, the Canadian police, if they want to kill you, they just shoot people. So. Canada technically does still have the death penalty. It's just like it's not. It's just like it's just immediate, right? If Canadian police want to kill you, they just kill you, right? So at least America, you get a due process. At least in America, you get a trial, right, before you get the death penalty. So, but in Canada, basically, so Canada abolished the death penalty, and Canada legally, if someone is actually given a trial, brought through due process, legally they're not supposed to be given the death penalty because Canada abolished the death penalty. But China, of course, has the death penalty. And apparently last year, I saw the news article, it was on CTV News. In fact, Melanie something, one of the ministers of, so it was really high up, one of the ministers of Canada, who was like Melanie something, I think, Melanie Joy, I think. Anyways, she was like, she worked right next to Justin Trudeau. She constantly worked beside Justin Trudeau, the French Canadian Prime Minister. She was giving a speech where she was saying that she felt bad for the Canadian families of the Canadians who were charged. There were Canadian criminals, Canadian drug dealers who were in China who were given the death penalty in China. Canadian drug dealers who apparently, because I guess if China can smuggle in fentanyl and cause half the Canadians to die from fentanyl poisoning, if China can do that to Canada and America, then Canada did the same thing to China. Canada went to China, these Canadian drug dealers, and they distributed drugs in China. And then China got pissed off, obviously, because China doesn't want drugs in their country. China does it to other countries. China laughs and does it to the United States. China gets some Americans addicted to drugs. China gets Canadians addicted to drugs, and then China laughs. But then China doesn't want anyone doing it back to them. So these Canadians went to China, they distributed drugs in China, and then they got the death penalty. Now, if these were Chinese people in Canada, Canada abolished the death penalty. So if these were Chinese spies, if these were Chinese people in Canada who were distributing drugs, so if these were Chinese drug dealers, right? So if these were Chinese drug dealers in Canada, they would have got all these lawyers, because China, they have millions of lawyers. China would have had all their lawyers, and those Chinese drug dealers would have been sent back to China without being harmed. But because it was the other way around, and now it was Canadians in China, these Canadians were given the death penalty. They were drug dealers. They were convicted Canadian drug dealers, and they were given the death penalty in China. And so the Canadian foreign minister, I think her name was Melanie Joy, she was, obviously giving her condolences to the Canadian families whose their Canadians were killed. But there's two sides to look at this, right? Obviously, someone can turn around and say, "Oh, these were criminals. These were Canadian criminals. They were drug dealers. They went to China. They should have known China would kill them, whatever." But but first off, I'm not defending criminals here because and I'm definitely not defending drug dealers because I don't defend drug dealers. No, no, no. I don't do drugs, nothing like that. But um, you would think that China, sorry, you would think that China at least could respect. I mean, if and China want to work together in any kind of relationship, you would think that China could at least turn around and say, "Hey, okay, so these drug dealers, yeah, they're guilty. I mean, we think they're guilty. They were given a trial in China. A Chinese trial is probably not a fair trial. China doesn't give people fair trials. So who knows if they were even really that guilty to begin with. But anyways, even if they really were guilty, you would think that China, the Chinese government, could turn around and say, hey, you know, Canada, whenever we have Chinatown, Canada tries to respect Chinese culture. Canada is very against the death penalty, right? Canada, it's part of Canadian culture. We are against the death penalty. We abolished the death penalty. You would think that China, Canada constantly bends over for China, Canada constantly is respecting China's culture. You would think that China could turn around and respect Canada's culture by saying, hey, maybe these drug dealers, maybe they'll give them life sentences, which life sentences in China are pretty bad. I mean, a life sentence in the Chinese prison, that's pretty bad. So maybe China, the Chinese government, could have turned around and given these Canadian drug dealers life sentences, uh, and then not giving them the death penalty, given the fact that the Chinese government knows how Canada is against the death penalty. But no, China didn't care. China didn't care about Canadian culture. China didn't care about Canadian freedom. China didn't care about our Canadian values. China didn't care. But we, as Canadians, we have to respect Chinatown. God forbid we went to Chinatown and we put chopsticks in our noses. God forbid Canadians went to a Chinese food restaurant and poured ketchup all over. No, actually, we do that. I don't do that. Well, I don't do that anymore. Anyways, I don't go to Chinese food restaurants anymore because when I found out Chinese food, how much MSG and how much ingredients, like really dangerous. And so I don't eat at Chinese food restaurants anymore. Ever since I became an adult, when I became an adult, I was like, no, I'm healthy. I'm gonna eat healthy. I would be vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian. I eat healthy. So, obviously when I was a kid, my parents, they brought us to Chinese food restaurants, but I didn't really like the food. It was too greasy, and I could kind of tell that there was something up with the food. So anyways, the point is that China doesn't respect Canada's culture. China went ahead and executed and gave the death penalty to these four Canadian drug dealers. Okay. Like, and listen, I'm not defending drug dealers. I'm not defending criminals, but I don't think they should have got the death penalty. I don't think that drug dealers should get the death penalty. I don't think anyone should get the death penalty. I am against the death penalty because there's a chance that those people might have been innocent. So they should always be given an opportunity to appeal. But like I said, I don't defend criminals at all. I'm actually very anti-drug. I don't do drugs. I'm anti-drug. But I'm also anti-death penalty for everything, for every case. Because there's so much corruption in the courts. They're always convicting the wrong people. They're always framing innocent people. Even America admits there's all of these people who were wrongfully convicted years later because of evidence being released, women coming forward admitting they lied. All of these cases of these people who were wrongfully convicted. So imagine if they were given the death penalty while they were wrongfully convicted. So that's why I am against the death penalty. And Canada, we are supposed to be against the death penalty, but China just like handed out those death penalty sentences to those Canadian drug dealers, and they were killed in China. So let's go back to the comments. So another thing that China does too is, yeah, China does do organ harvesting as well. So abandoned belief came in and said, and they harvest their organs too. Yeah, China does do organ harvesting. Actually, I'm not an expert on organ harvesting, so I'm not going to get into that. But there is actually was a major organ harvesting scandal in Canada involving China, but I won't get into that right now. But I will get into the fact is that Canada does have these top secret um, Canadian research facilities in the middle of Canadian forests. So if you look on Google Maps, uh, you will see that Canada is full of Canadian forests. Like Canada is covered in these Canadian forests. And if you tried going in these Canadian forests, you would probably get lost. There's a lot of Canadian backpackers that went missing. There's a lot of Canadian campers and Canadian backpackers and Canadian tourists that went missing in Canadian forests. So Canadian forests are very deep. They're well covered, right? There's trees, right? And obviously, and deep inside Canadian forests, there are these rumors are no longer rumors no more. They were rumors for a while. But deep inside Canadian forests, they have these top secret Canadian research facilities where they experiment on innocent people. And China and Canada, because as much as China and Canada are enemies in many ways, China and Canada also work together on other things. So, and a lot of the people who work at these facilities are Chinese. So when America was blaming China for COVID, when America was blaming China for COVID, and America was blaming the Wuhan lab in China, Americans pretty close. I mean, actually, Americans are very close because Canada is even closer. So Canada also has, and of course, we're not saying that the Wuhan lab in China didn't have, they weren't doing that. They were doing it as well, the Wuhan lab in China. But also Canada does have their own labs as well. Canada has many top secret research facilities, especially deep within Canadian forests. That's where Canada hides them. Because obviously, Canada's not going to put one next to a Starbucks. Canada's not going to like announce a grand opening of a top secret research facility where they experiment on innocent people. Canada's not going to like do a commercial. Hey everyone, try out the new ice cap at Tim Hortons. And right next door to the Tim Hortons is a top secret Canadian research facility where they experiment on innocent people. Of course, Canada's not going to announce this and admit to this. So Canada hides these places deep inside these Canadian forests. And you know, if you don't believe me, get Donald Trump, get the United States military, go to Canada, get the United States military, go inside of these Canadian forests, you'll find them. If the United States military, if they send a SEAL, well, they're gonna need more than a SEAL team. They're gonna need more than just 5 guys. They're gonna need to send the whole military to Canada because, you know, Canada, we're not as like unarmed as you think we are. Like, Canada, like, is very anti-gun, but Canada does have weapons. So you're gonna have to, send more than just 5 guys. Anyways, if you actually did send the United States military to Canada and they searched these Canadian forests, they would find these top secret government Canadian government research facilities where they experiment on innocent people. They experiment on the human genome. They experiment on cell biology. They experiment on people's blood. They experiment with viruses. They experiment genetic mutation. They experiment all types of stuff. They experiment new experimental drugs. These top secret Canadian force, these top secret Canadian research facilities, they're real and they're hidden in the middle of Canadian forests. And a lot of Chinese people work at these top secret Canadian research facilities in the middle of Canadian forests. So COVID wasn't an accident. HIV wasn't an accident. Ebola, HPV, the bubonic plague, all of these things were not accidents. Many of these viruses were man-made. They were man-made viruses, and they came from not only the Wuhan lab in China, but also these top secret Canadian research facilities in the middle of Canadian forests, which are hidden, mostly hidden because of the trees, and then they're mostly partially underground. So many of them are also partially underground. They're very hidden within Canadian forests. And if you don't believe me, get Donald Trump and get the United States military, send in the United States military to search these Canadian forests, and you will find these top secret Canadian research facilities where they experiment with bioweapons, biological weapons. They practice biological warfare. They experiment biological weapons, biological warfare on innocent prisoners, innocent people. And of course, Canadian backpackers, so many Canadian tourists go missing, Canadian backpackers go missing in Canadian forests. But Canada also has many prisoners. And this is why Canada loves to take immigrants. Just because Canada claims to be such an immigrant friendly country, like, sure, a lot of immigrants do get jobs. A lot of immigrants do get houses. A lot of immigrants do get good lives in Canada. But then there's also a lot of immigrants in Canada that don't get the Canadian dream. There's a lot of Canadian immigrants. There's a lot of immigrants in Canada that go missing. So yeah, Canada is a country where that takes a lot of immigrants, and that's why Canada has been flooded with Indian immigrants. But there's a lot of immigrants that try going to Canada, and if those immigrants, if they don't got money, if they don't got connections, if they don't got family, if those immigrants are orphans from another country, a lot of these people go missing, and then they end up as experimental subjects. They end up in these Canadian research facilities where they experiment experimental drugs, they experiment experimental procedures, they do all types of experimentation on these innocent people who are, become prisoners in these top secret Canadian research facilities in the middle of Canadian forests. So I'm a conservative Canadian. So someone came in and said, law, now he's asking for us US military intervention in Canada. I'm a conservative Canadian. I'm against all of these liberals. Okay. I'm conservative Canadian, but I don't trust any politicians. I think the American politicians are bad. And I think the Canadian politicians are bad. They're all bad. Okay. The Canadian politicians are bad. The American politicians are bad. The American police are bad. And the Canadian police are bad. So I'm a conservative Canadian. Okay. And what my criticism of Trump was that he was pretending to drain the swamp and he didn't. Trump was promising that he was not part of the rich elites, that even though he's the richest of the rich elites, Trump was promising that he's not has nothing to do with the Epstein Island or the Epstein list, even though now we found out that Trump is like the king of the Epstein list, the Epstein Island, the Epstein list. So Trump was pretending to be like this outsider who was going to come in and save the day and drain the swamp and get rid of all of these corrupt politicians. Trump didn't do that. So my criticism of Trump is the fact that he didn't do what he promised he was going to do. So if Trump was a real conservative, he was against all of these crazy liberals. If Trump was a real conservative, real Republican, he would have gone in and he would have drained the swamp like he promised he was going to do. He didn't. So I'm a conservative Canadian, and my criticism of Trump was that he didn't do what he promised he would do. That doesn't mean that I am liberal. No, I'm not liberal at all. Okay, I don't. I am very conservative. I believe in conservative values. I believe that everyone should wear pants and wear a suit and tie and dress like a human being and dress like a professional. I don't agree with rappers. I don't like these rapper criminals, these thugs who do all of this rap music, these horrible racist rap music where they talk about, crackers and stuff. I don't agree with all of this terrible rap music where they talk about gangbangs and all of this stuff. I don't agree with any of that. I don't agree with that at all. I'm very conservative. I believe in protecting people. I believe in human rights. I believe in freedom of speech. And I'm not one of these liberal, communist, crazy communist liberals that are like rappers and these Democrats. They're all into rap music and they're, anyways. So no, like don't assume anything of me. Don't come in here and assume that I'm some Canadian liberal. Yeah, sure. Canada is probably 70% liberal. I would estimate that Canada is like 60%, 70% of these crazy liberals. These crazy liberals, they control Canada. French Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, the French Canadian pervert who takes pictures with drag queens and transvestites, it's all over Google Images. So if you just Google search Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, transvestite parade, drag queen parade. It's all over Google Images. Justin Trudeau goes to the former French Canadian Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau, he goes to transvestite parades, takes pictures in public with transvestites at transvestite parades, and he even thinks it's fine for transvestites to be school teachers. Canada is so screwed up, they have transvestite school teachers. Not to mention the Indian doctor, the Indian Canadian doctor who was getting away with molesting his own patients. Then they also in Canada, they have transvestite Canadian school teachers. And these transvestite Canadian school teachers are taking pictures with Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, at transvestite parades. And these transvestite school teachers, you think that all they're doing is teaching the kids? These transvestite school teachers are probably doing more than that. Why do these transvestites want to become Canadian school teachers so badly? So Canada is full of these nut jobs. Canada is full of these Indian doctors who are molesting people, these Indian anesthesiologists who molest people on the operating table. Canada is full of transvestite school teachers. These transvestites are openly taking pictures with the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who thinks it's so normal to take pictures with transvestite school teachers and thinks it's normal for transvestites to be Canadian school teachers. Like Canada's screwed up. Canada is like 70% liberal. So I'm a conservative Canadian who is against all of this crap. Okay, I'm against Epstein Island. I'm against all of this, the Diddy list, the Puff Daddy, which by the way, Puff Daddy, I mean, how could you not know that Puff Daddy was a pedo? Puff Daddy is the most pedo name. Any guy, any rapper who calls himself Daddy, especially Puff Daddy, get it? Puff Daddy, Puff Daddy. Don't you get it? Puff Daddy. Any rapper who calls himself Puff Daddy, or even worse, P Diddy. P Diddy, and you didn't know he was a diddler? You didn't know P Diddy was a diddler with a name like P Diddy? P Diddy, P Diddy. You didn't know P Diddy was a diddler with a name like P Diddy? Okay? You didn't know that he was a diddler with a name like Puff Daddy? Like, are you Americans clueless? Obviously he was a pedo. These Epstein lists, these rich elites, they're all getting away. See, even P Diddy, even Puff Daddy, he got away with a slap on the wrist. He wasn't even really convicted. He got a slap on the wrist. He got nothing. He was like convicted on a lesser charge. Okay, Puff Daddy got like for how much evil stuff that Puff Daddy actually did, Puff Daddy and his whole career, he basically got a slap on the wrist. And why would American judges give a slap in the wrist to convicted pedos? Because American judges are also pedos. That's why. That's why American judges are giving a slap on the wrist to pedos like Puff Daddy. Because American judges are pedos themselves. It's a whole network of them. It's a whole network of pedo transvestites. It's a whole network of pedo rappers. It's a whole network of the Epstein list. It's a whole network of rich white elite pedos. It's a whole network of them. Okay? And they're American judges, they're American politicians like Hillary Clinton, they're the president of the United States. I wouldn't be surprised if Obama. You remember Donald Trump was saying he was going to arrest Obama for something? Remember, this is just a few months ago. I remember seeing on the news something about Trump was saying he was wanting to arrest Obama for something. I wouldn't be surprised if Obama was involved in the Epstein scandal. If Obama and Bill Clinton were involved in the Epstein scandal and the Epstein list and the Diddy list and the Puff Daddy list. I wouldn't be surprised. So I'm a Canadian conservative and I'm against all of this crap. But also the American police, they're just as bad because they're not arresting Hillary Clinton. They're not arresting Nancy Pelosi. The American police, they're not arresting the real criminals. The American police are in on it. The American police, the American politicians, the American judges who are giving a slap on the wrist to Puff Daddy, convicted pedo, they're all in on it. They're all pedos too. It's a whole network of them. The rich elite pedos, they protect each other. Why aren't these American police officers, why are they going around? They're tasering British sailors who are getting drunk, who are partying. They're going around beating up British sailors, but they're not arresting these rich elite pedos on the Epstein list? Why aren't these American police arresting these rich elite pedos on the Epstein list? Why aren't they doing that? If these American police are really about upholding the law, then why aren't they arresting these rich elite pedos on the Epstein list? Why does it take these people years to finally do something? And then when Puff Daddy is finally arrested, after 20 years of God knows what he was doing, Puff Daddy, when he's finally arrested, he's given a slap on the wrist. The American judge gives Puff Daddy a slap on the wrist. Why? Because the American judges are pedos, the American police officers are pedos, the American politicians are pedos, and Donald Trump came in saying he was going to drain the swamp. And did he? No. He basically let the swamp become even bigger. So they're all bad. All of these politicians are bad. All of these American politicians are bad. All of these Canadian politicians are bad. I'm a conservative Canadian, and I believe in protecting people. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe in human rights. And that's why we got to do something about this. So, and another thing too, Donald Trump, he was saying he was going to release the Epstein list. He said he was going to he was going to say he was going to expose all of these rich elite pedos. Donald Trump said he was going to expose all these rich elites. Did he? No. And then he goes around just a few months ago. Remember, he was with Pam Bondi, and he's like, Epstein list. You guys are still talking about the Epstein list. Why are you guys still talking about the Epstein? Like you see, Donald Trump, he's in on it. He's just as bad as the rest of them. Donald Trump, he was saying that oh yeah, he was going to prosecute these people on the Epstein list. He was not going to let these rich, right, elite pedos get away with the Epstein crimes and all of this stuff. And then sure enough, Donald Trump, he covers everything up. And then when people go to ask Donald Trump about the Epstein list, he totally forgot. He's like, oh, he wants everyone to just forget about the Epstein list. What Epstein list? You guys are still talking about that. Like clearly Donald Trump just went in and covered up the whole Epstein list. So they're all corrupt. All of these American politicians are all corrupt. These Canadian politicians are corrupt. And you know, Vladimir Putin, who's like my idol, and I don't agree with everything Russia does. No, I don't agree with everything the Kremlin does. I don't agree with everything Russia does. But Vladimir Putin, and I do speak fluent Russian. I studied the Russian language for years. I speak fluent Russian. If you watch Vladimir Putin, he gives many speeches where he accuses the West of being pedos. Now, how would he know that they're pedos? Maybe the Russian government has been blackmailing the American politicians, right? I mean, that could explain why China and Russia are able to get these American politicians to do whatever Russia and China wants. Did you notice how these American politicians, they basically bend over for communist China? And especially these Canadian politicians, these American politicians, they practically bend over for communist China and they bend over for Russia. They do whatever Russia and China wants. Probably because Russia and China have been blackmailing these American politicians with the fact that they're pedos. They're rich, white elite pedos on the Epstein list. So Donald Trump, he said he was going to be tough on China. He's not really tough on China. He said he was going to be tough on Russia. He's not really tough on Russia. Russia's winning the war. Donald Trump, when he went to go meet with Putin in Alaska just a few months ago or last month, when Donald Trump met with Putin in Alaska, Donald Trump was practically kissing Putin's ass. Donald Trump was about to like pretty much go down on Putin. Donald Trump like go down on, anyways, you know what I mean. Go down on him in the sense like, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. Donald Trump was basically kissing Putin's ass. Donald Trump wasn't tough on Putin at all. They were shaking hands, they were hugging, they were kissing. Donald Trump and Putin were about to make out, okay? So we all saw it. Donald Trump's not hard on Russia. He's not against Russia. He's not against communist China. Donald Trump, whenever he meets the Chinese president, they're always hugging and kissing and embracing. And whenever Donald Trump meets the Russian president, they're always hugging and kissing and embracing. They look like they're best friends. They look like they're best comrades. So that's probably what. So Russia and China, they've probably been using all of this rich white elite pedo politicians. They've probably been blackmailing these people. And that's why American people are constantly getting screwed over. Canadians are getting screwed over. And then Russians, do you see Russia lately? They got like sports cars in Russia. They got mansions. The Russian people, they go on trips to Hawaii. The Russian people are rich now. Like they're all rich. Now Americans are poor and Russians are rich. Like 40 years ago, Russians were poor and Americans were rich, right? 40 years ago, approximately, Americans and Canadians were rich. So 40 years ago, approximately, Americans and Canadians were rich and Russians were poor and Chinese were poor. Yeah, like, let's not forget the Chinese. So 40 years ago, Russians and Chinese were poor and Americans and Canadians were rich. Now, Americans and Canadians are poor and Russians and Chinese are rich. It's totally changed. It's totally changed. They basically robbed us. China and Russia, they went in and they robbed Canada and they robbed the United States. And now Americans and Canadians are poor. Canadians are dying from poor health care. Now Americans and Canadians are poor. Americans and Canadians are dying from poor health care. And communist China and Russia, they're all rich elites. They got the best healthcare in the world. They're living like way longer. What happened? How did Canada and the United States go from 40 years ago? Canada and the United States were rich and had good healthcare and were living long lives. To suddenly now, and then 40 years ago, Russia and China was poor. To now, it's reversed. It's totally reversed. It's reversed. Canada and the United States has swapped with China and Russia. 40 years ago, Russia and China was poor. 40 years ago, Russia and China had poor quality healthcare. 40 years ago, Russia and China had a short lifespan. And now it's the opposite. Now Canada and America is poor. Now Canada and America has short lifespan. Now Canada and America has poor healthcare and they're dying from poor healthcare. So Canada and the United States has been robbed. China and Russia has destroyed and robbed the United States and Canada. So someone should do a whole YouTube video. Like I'm not an expert YouTuber. I'm not an expert on making YouTube videos, but someone should make a video showing that like 40 years ago, Russia and China used to be these poor countries with poor healthcare where they had like little to no food. They were dying. They were poor Russians and China. Like if you even just 20, 30 years ago, Russia, you remember when in Russia they opened the first McDonald's in Russia and like everyone was lining up for food, you know? And then you saw all the poor Russians, like Russia and China, they went from like 40 years ago being the poorest countries in the world to suddenly now they're all rich in China and Russia. And now Americans and Canadians are poor. And now Americans and Canadians are dying of poor quality healthcare. So a YouTuber, a professional YouTuber should make a video pointing out how Russia and China have basically swapped places with Canada and the United States. That would make a really good, interesting YouTube video. But I don't like to, like, I'm very careful not to make too many YouTube videos about China. So, especially since I'm not good at making videos. I'm not really an expert on making videos. I'm okay. Sometimes like I know a little bit. I know a bit on making videos, but I'm not an expert and my videos don't really come out too well. So I think someone else should do it. I think a better video, a person who's good at making quality YouTube videos should really make a good YouTube video showing how Russia and China has swapped places with Canada and the United States. So, yeah, I'm careful. Yeah, Mike. Oh, Mike, I almost sent your name. Mike came in. Mike, Mike came in, and he has like one of those names, right? So his last, I can't say his last name, but anyways, Mike came in. I almost said his full name. I almost said Mike. Anyways, Mike came in and he said, "Careful not to make too many videos about China. Why law? Because China will retaliate against you. That's why China retaliates against Canadians. There's been Canadian journalists who went missing. There's been Canadian journalists who complained about communist China. They went missing. So China retaliates. China whacks people. I mean, the Chinese mafia is worse than the KGB and the Italian mafia, in my opinion. The Chinese mafia, like they're bad. They will kill you. The Chinese mafia will kill you. So there's been Canadian journalists who went missing because of communist China, because they spoke out against communist China. In fact, I said it earlier that there's Canadian journalists that went to Canadian prison for a long time just for doing news stories on communist China. So communist China is a real threat. And this is also why Japan and China historically were total enemies, right? So Japan and China used to like they were killing each other. Japan hated China for years. Like Japan had a major war with China. Japan like really saw China as a threat. Japan did not like the Chinese people. Like the Japanese people, they saw horrible qualities in the Chinese people, like thieves. So if you go to Japan, right? Japan doesn't tolerate thieves. Japan doesn't like criminals. Japan doesn't tolerate thieves, doesn't like criminals. Japan is very honorable. Japan is about honor. China, China, they're like thieves, and they're like thieves, they're hackers. China, like they're overpopulated. So Japan, for many years, Japan was very anti-China for many years. This is why they had a major war. This is why, everyone knows that Japan and China used to be mortal enemies and they had a major war with the Japanese people, right? So, um, Japan saw China as a threat for many years, but nobody else saw this because, well, 60, 70 years ago, we didn't have the media like we have it today, right? So 60, 70 years ago, people, what they saw, all they saw was Japan attacking China. They didn't see why, right? They didn't see why Japan was attacking China. They just saw it as that they portrayed these evil Japanese people who were attacking China, and they portrayed the Japanese people as monsters for attacking China. But we never really heard Japan's side of the story. We never heard Japan's side of the story. And now we're starting to hear Japan and Germany's side of the story. We never really heard Germany's side of the story either. So Germany in World War II Germany, we never really heard their side of the story. We heard Russia's side of the story, which is, oh, those Germans are Nazis. Those Germans are Nazis. So we heard America and Russia's side of the story about Nazi Germany, that the Germans were evil, the Germans were Nazis. But we never actually heard really Germany's side of the story until recently. So now we're starting to hear Germany's side of the story. We're starting to hear Japan's side of the story, right? And suddenly we're realizing that maybe Japan was right about communist China because everyone's now afraid of China. I mean, the United States, I mean, they're probably wishing that they just let Japan do what they needed to do to China. The United States is probably wishing they stayed out of it and just let the Japanese do what they needed to do with China because everyone's afraid of China now. China has become extremely powerful. Okay. And Japan, the Japanese people, they're like, we told you so. The Japanese people, they're laughing their asses off. We told you. We tried telling you the Japanese people, but they didn't listen. They just portrayed the Japanese people as evil monsters for attacking China. Okay. And if you look at the Japanese people, they're very honorable people. They do not tolerate thieves. They do not tolerate criminals. They do not tolerate drug dealers, the Japanese people. So they especially did not like China because China was full of thieves. China was overpopulated. China was constantly becoming overpopulated. They were full of thieves. They were stealing food from Japan. Chinese thieves would go into Japan and steal food from Japan. So you have these responsible Japanese families that have like what, two kids per family, right? So they're in Japan, they're responsible. They're like, okay, if they only have enough money to feed two kids, they're only gonna have two kids, right? But then in China just have kids, and then the Chinese solution for having too many kids is just to steal. Is just to steal food from like to just to go in and rob Japan. So did you see the video by Sunken Samurai? So there's a video on YouTube. I saw it about 2 months ago from Sunken Samurai. So Sunken Samurai alleges that one of the reasons why Japan invaded China and slaughtered the Chinese, one of the reasons is because of a great food heist. So there was a big period in Japan when they were starving and they were poor. They had no food. Well, this was China too. China and Japan, because of China's overpopulation problem, because of the overpopulation in China being overpopulated, there was very little food. And this was in Europe too. This was around the whole world. So really, the shortage of food was really the whole world, but especially China and Japan was a shortage of food. And the Japanese people were responsible. So if they only had enough food to feed two kids, if they only had enough money to take care of two kids, they only had two kids. But in China, they became so overpopulated, they were just having lots and lots of kids. And of course, when their population just goes out of control, suddenly they don't have enough food to feed everyone. Because if you have like 20 kids per family, you're not going to have enough food to feed 20 kids per family, right? So you have to so China just completely was irresponsible, and they just overpopulated so quickly. And then what happened, apparently, according to Sunken Samurai said that prior to Japan invading China, China had went in and like did a big food heist and stolen a whole bunch of food from Japan. So these honorable, responsible Japanese people who were budgeting and would only, if they only could had afford to feed two kids, they only have two kids, right? The Japanese people, they were rationing the food, they were budgeting, they were responsible, the Japanese people. Next thing you know, all of these Chinese thieves from China, because China was overpopulated, all of these Chinese people from China, they went into Japan and they robbed Japan. They stole all this food from Japan. And they made the food shortage in Japan even worse. So apparently, this is the reason, one of the main reasons why Japan invaded China. But of course, we never heard Japan's side of the story. They just, in the media 70 years ago, they just portrayed, oh, those Japanese people are monsters. They invaded China. They slaughtered the Chinese. Those Japanese people, they just are monsters, right? But we never really heard Japan's side of the story. And of course, there's two sides of the story. There's three sides of the story. There's four sides of the story, right? There's many different sides of the story. So, and there's also Germany's side of the story. We never really heard until recently Germany's side of the story, right? Because we just always heard, oh, those Germans were Nazis and blah, blah, blah. We never really heard German side. I'm sure in Germany, the German soldiers were heroes in the German people's eyes, right? The German soldiers were defending Germany. The German soldiers were defending Germany, what they were supposed to do. German soldiers were supposed to defend Germany. So the German soldiers were heroes in the German people's eyes. They weren't like these evil Nazis, right? So, there's two sides to a story. There's three sides to a story. There's four sides to a story. I'm not saying that I agree with Nazi Germany. No, not at all. I'm just saying that we need to hear everyone's side of the story. There's always two sides of the story. There's three sides of the story. And yeah. But I'm not saying that I was like, no. What I'm telling you is that I don't believe everything that the media tells us. Especially with Donald Trump, who's going around yelling fake news. Like Donald Trump himself is calling the media liars. Like if we can't even trust what the media said 5 minutes ago, like if we can't even trust what our current media today, we can't even trust what the journalists are saying today. Even Trump is going around saying that the media fake news, fake news. Even Trump's admitting that the news is fake. So if we can't even trust what the media is saying today, How can we even trust or know for sure what the media reported 70 years ago when World War II was going on? The Germans might have very well have been really nice people, the Germans. The Germans might have well have been the good guys in World War II. The Japanese and the Germans in World War II might actually have been the good guys, and the good guys might have lost the war. And that also would explain why how come after Germany and Japan lost, if Germany and Japan were such bad guys, then how come after they lost, there were so much problems in the United States? After Germany and Japan lost the war, Canada, the United States, and Russia, there were so many problems of corruption. So how do you explain that if Japan and Germany, if they really were the bad guys, then how do you explain after they lost the war, then suddenly we see all of this corruption in America, all of this corruption in Canada, all of this corruption in Russia, and in fact, and then sure enough, the bad guys were fighting each other because then we had the United States fighting the Russia in the Cold War, right? There was the major Cold War. So, so Germany now is laughing their ass. Germany lost, and Germany, they're not laughing. What I meant was that Germany is saying, "We told you so." Germany is saying, "We told you so," because after Germany lost the war, suddenly America and Russia are fighting, who were allies, who were supposed to be allies against Germany. In World War II, America and Russia were allies against Germany, and then now Germany loses the war, and now suddenly America and Russia are fighting. Why? Because America and Russia were the bad guys to begin with, and now it's two bad guys fighting each other. This is why for many years there was no peace between Russia and the United States. This is why for many years during the Cold War, the Russians and the Americans were in a brutal Cold War against each other because they're both bad guys fighting each other, and they were the bad guys. And the Germans, the nice Germans and the Japanese, they tried stopping the bad guys. They tried stopping the bad Russians. They said. So we're starting to see different sides of the story come out. Thank God to free media. Thank God because of media. Thank God we're starting to hear, 40, 50 years ago, they would never let us hear German side of the story. 40, 50 years ago, if someone wanted to ask, hey, what's Germany's side of the story? They throw you in they throw you in a mental asylum. If 40, 50 years ago, someone tried to be like, hey, can we ask what was the German side of the story? They went, you want to know what the German side of the story was? And then it'd be like, oh, are you a Nazi supporter? No. Just because you want to hear their side of the story doesn't mean you're a Nazi supporter. No, not at all. Just because you want to hear what Germany in World War II side of the story was, that doesn't mean you're a Nazi. Okay, I just want to hear two sides of the story. I'm not saying I agree with them. Just because I want to hear Germany's side of the story doesn't mean that I'm a Nazi or I agree with anything they did. I just want to hear what their side of the story was. If you're a person on the outside and there's a conflict between two countries and you want to hear the other country's side of the story, it's not because you're with the other country. It's not because you're like a secret asset, a secret agent for the other country. You're just an outsider who sees a conflict between two countries. You want to hear both sides of the story. When I see Russia and Ukraine fighting, I want to hear Russia's side of the story and I want to hear Ukraine's side of the story. Just because I want to hear Russia's side of the story doesn't mean that I'm working for the Russians or I'm some Russian agent working for the Russians again. Just because I want to hear Russia's side of the story doesn't mean that I'm on Russia's side. I just want to hear both sides of the story. I want to hear Ukraine's side of the story. I want to hear Russia's side of the story. I want to hear Japan's side of the story. I want to hear China's side of the story. So 50 years ago, someone tried asking what was Germany's side of the story. Oh, they throw you in a mental asylum. They wouldn't even let you ask. That's what it was like 50, 40. That's how bad the media was. So thank God the media, people were starting to hear different sides of the story. We're starting to hear different opinions, different points of view. Thank God. So And then what happened too with Japan was in World War II, the Japanese apparently they were allies initially with America, and um, apparently the United States had screwed Japan in some sort of oil deal. So it was another issue over oil. So you should watch two movies, Midway. It's all about the Japanese American War between Pearl Harbor. It was all about Pearl Harbor, right? Pearl Harbor, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in the United States. Midway was a good movie, and if you watch the Midway movie, it kind of shows a little bit of Japan's side of the story, sort of. Not really, but it still makes the Japanese people look like monsters. But it does kind of show you that the Japanese people apparently there was some sort of dispute over oil. It was an oil dispute. So Midway is a good movie, and then there's a second movie too about the Japanese War. Can't remember the name of it, but so one was Midway, and then there was another one. I think it was called Pearl Harbor. So there's probably a movie called Pearl Harbor, and there's a movie called Midway. Anyways, but the point is to hear other people's side of the story, and right now with Russia and Ukraine, I mean I really don't know what's going on. I mean I don't know why Russia and Ukraine, why this war, if it's really a war, why would it have lasted like what 3 4 years? This is bizarre and concerning. It doesn't make sense. Like, how is this war not already over? I don't understand how this war is still even going on. This is an issue. This is a big thing in my mind about this war going on for this long that is concerning to me. It's not explainable. And it does seem like it almost seems like both Ukraine and Russia are screwing us because Donald Trump and they're even the Americans, they're saying like, why are we sending all of our tax dollars to Ukraine? Like I kind of have this suspicion that Russia and Ukraine, like they're just secretly doing this to try to get money from America. Like they're bleeding America dry financially, and also, they're taking all of America's weapons because we're sending our weapons to Ukraine. Like, I remember there was some German guy who was jokingly saying, if Germany sends all of our weapons to Ukraine, Germany's gonna be defenseless. And like, so even the Americans were saying, like, why are we sending all of our tax dollars? Why are we sending billions to Ukraine? I kind of have the suspicion that Russia and Ukraine, they're all in on it. They're working together and they're just doing this as a scheme. They're sneaky, right? The Russians have always been sneaky. Sneaky Russians, sneaky Ukrainians. They're pretending to do this war just to bleed America dry financially, take all of America's money, take as much weapons they can from the United States. There's something going on here. There's something else going on in the background. Because how do you explain this war still going on 3 years later? And on top of it, if this was really a war, why wouldn't Japan be flanking Russia from the other side? Why wouldn't Poland? Why wouldn't like Russia is surrounded? Like this war could have been over. Like the all of these people, all these countries that are anti-Russia could have just gone in and just from every side just flanked Russia from every side. Poland, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, all of these countries that Poland, all of these Ukraine, all of these countries, Georgia hates Russia apparently too. The Georgians, all of these countries that border Russia, they could have just all gone in on it, ganged up on, done one big gang up on Russia, and next thing you know, Russia would be done. This war would have been over. So something's not making sense here with all of this. There's something going on. And given 9/11 happened, 9/11 and World War II, I don't trust anything the media says. I don't trust anything these journalists say. They're tricking us, they're fooling us. There's gonna be like maybe another purge or something. You know those purge movies? Like they really do purges. They purge people, and maybe they're gonna do another purge because the rich elites they believe the Earth's overpopulated. I mean, the rich elites they cause the overpopulation problem too. I mean, the rich elites they're the ones who cause the overpopulation problem, but especially the rich elites. They're always doing these purges. They're purging people. They're doing ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is another one they do. They do lots of ethnic cleansing. So, ethnic cleansing, purging. there's something's coming. Something big is coming. And you know, and lately they've been using a lot of biological warfare, like COVID, Ebola. All of these are biological weapons. So the next big purge might be another biological weapon, or it might even be something else. It might be chemical, it might be biological, or the police just might go around going door to door and just shoot everyone. The police just might start shooting people. Who knows? But all I know is, you know, the rich elites, they do think the world's overpopulated, and they are planning. I think they are planning something, and I think that anyone who thinks they're safe, no one's safe. No, and if you ever watch like these movies, these documentaries, these World War II history movies, no one's safe. Like no one's safe. Like Hitler was like what? The leader of Germany, the most powerful country, and look what happened to him, right? Nobody is ever safe. None of these rich elites are even safe themselves. So any of these rich elites who think, oh, they're in on it, they're friends with Trump. Any of these rich elites who think they're friends with Trump, they're in on it, they're safe. No, no one's safe. Because Donald Trump, he'll backstab anyone. Like Donald Trump would backstab his own, like, you know, Donald Trump would backstab anyone, in my opinion. So I don't think anyone's safe. I don't think none of the rich elites are safe. We should all be concerned. And yeah, and I mean they lied to us before. They lied to us about 9/11. Bill Clinton lied to us about bonking Monica Lewinsky in the White House. Uh, they lied. George Bush lied to us about the weapons of mass destruction and about the war over oil. They're constantly lying to us, like they've lied to us about so many things. So I don't trust anything the media says. I don't think trust anything the journalists say. They're all liars, and there's something's coming. Either it's maybe it's another 9/11 that's coming, maybe it's another COVID. Either maybe COVID not coming or 9/11 coming, but something that's coming. Something big is coming. It's gonna be a big major purge, and I mean, you know, the rich elites, maybe they're going to be the ones who are going to be the ones saved, or maybe the rich elites, maybe they're going to be the ones purged. Who knows, right? Maybe it's going to be a purge of the rich elites, right? Who knows? So, but all I know is something's coming, and we all got to stay vigilant and stay safe, be careful, thing, and and never assume that you're safe. You know, especially there's probably all these people that voted for Trump, and they were this, you know, there's all of these people that you know, so there people are being deceived all the time. That's what it's literally deception. That's what deception is. Deception is when someone you trust deceives you, right? So you can't be fooled by one of your enemies, right? Because you would expect an enemy to fool you. You would expect an enemy you know, you wouldn't trust an enemy to begin with, right? You would never trust your enemy to begin with. So when you're really deceived, when you fall victim to deception, people who fall to victim or deception is someone you trusted, right? So, you know, there's going to be a major deception that's going to happen, and it's not going to come from your enemies because you would have expected it to come from your enemies, right? You can't be betrayed by your enemies. It's not like you never got the trust from your enemies to begin with. So when you're betrayed, when someone is betrayed, you're betrayed from someone you trusted. So it's going to be someone you trusted who betrays you. So all of these rich elites, I don't think they're safe either. I don't think just because they're rich elites means they're safe. There's going to be a lot of backstabbing going on. There's going to be a lot of deception, a lot of double agents, triple agents, quadruple agents. There's going to be all types of things, and you know, I wouldn't be shocked. You know, after 9/11, after you know, if you had told me before 9/11 happened that these planes are going to hit the twin towers, right? Everyone would have thought that was crazy, right? If someone went up to you and said before 9/11, right? If someone from the future went into the past and went right before 9/11 happened and told everyone that the planes were going to hit the twin towers, they would think that person was crazy, right? They would throw that person in the mental asylum, right? If there was someone from the future, time traveled from the future, who went into the past, who went just before 9/11 and tried to warn everyone about the planes hitting the twin towers, they would think that that guy or that woman was crazy. They would put them in a mental asylum, right? So, like no one, we can't, no one knows for sure the future. We cannot foresee the future, right? So we don't know. Just like the people before 9/11 had no idea 9/11 was going to happen. They probably never thought it would ever happen, and it happened, right? So who knows what's going to happen in the near future, right? Who knows what's going to happen in the near future? There could be an even bigger 9/11. There could be a bigger COVID. There could be World War IV, World War III could suddenly happen. The people in World War II, I'm sure none of them really actually thought World War II was going to happen. I'm sure the people right before World War II, they probably never really thought World War II was going to happen, and it happened. So who knows what will happen in the future? So I'm gonna wrap up this live stream. Thank you for everyone to coming. I did go over the comments. There was a lot of comments. Someone kept saying that I didn't talk about the British sailors. I did. I did at the beginning of the live stream, and then we went off to other topics. So the person who came in later, there were people who came in later to live stream who came in later, and then they didn't think I was talking about the British sailors. I had already talked about the British sailors at the beginning of the live stream, so that's why they didn't hear me because they came in later to live stream. But if you know this, I'm gonna make this recording available. So this live stream, I'm gonna obviously it's gonna be available after I finish the live stream, so people can go replay it back. People can replay back the live stream, and they'll see that I did talk at the beginning about the British sailors and this whole incident. But of course, we veered into different topics with politics and stuff, politics and Russia and China and the war between Russia and Ukraine and how this is affecting American and British relationship. Obviously, incidents like this. Obviously, if American police officers are beating up British sailors, tasering them, and humiliating them, strip searching them, making them take their clothes off in prison, and then like strip searching them and then making them bend over, like this was humiliating. This was humiliating to the British government. This is humiliating to the British Navy sailors. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the British Navy sailors, didn't want to help the United States after this. Like, the British Navy sailors, they're supposed to be helping defend the United States from Russia and China. But like, if American police officers are going around beating up, tasering, attacking, British Navy sailors, and sure they were drunk, but lots of Americans get drunk. There's Americans are getting drunk every day. American college parties, Americans are constantly getting drunk and publicly intoxicated, and those Americans aren't arrested. There's people who jaywalk. There's friggin' Nancy Pelosi who does insider trading. Donald Trump said he would have send her to prison. He didn't. So why are all these rich elite politicians? They're getting away with all of these horrible crimes. They're on the Epstein list, getting away with insider trading. They're probably getting away with murdering people. Meanwhile, there's these British Navy sailors who are just trying to have a good time, just trying to party, blow off some steam, right? They work hard. They have a saying in English, in the English language, there's a saying, work hard, play hard, right? They work hard, they play hard. They're just, they're nice guys. They're British Navy sailors. They're just going around partying, having a good time. People get drunk when they party, alcoholics, when they're drinking and they're partying, they have a good time, they get drunk. But they weren't like doing anything nasty. They weren't being rude to anyone. They weren't hurting anyone. They weren't like ripping off the stock market like Nancy Pelosi's been doing, apparently, according to Trump. Trump's own words, Trump said he wanted to prosecute Nancy Pelosi. He literally gave a speech. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, gave a speech saying he wanted to prosecute Nancy Pelosi. Did he? No. He also said he was going to send Hillary Clinton to prison for being part of like the Pizzagate scandal, the Epstein scandal. Did he? No. Donald Trump also said, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, Donald Trump, also said that he was going to prosecute all of those sick, rich white elite pedos on the Epstein list. Did he? No. Donald Trump. Donald Trump so far has protected all of these rich elites, these rich elite criminals. They're the real criminals. These white collar criminals, these rich elite pedos on the Epstein list, those are the rich elite criminals. Those are the real criminals. Those rich elite politicians who do insider trading, the rich elite politicians on the Epstein list, the racist American police officers who murder innocent black people, the racist American police officers, the homophobic American police officers who beat up innocent people, the corrupt American police officers who put innocent people away in prison, and they're corrupt, dirty cops, and they plant drugs on people, and they get innocent people put in prison. Those are the real criminals. These American police officers, these American politicians, these American rich elite politicians, these American lawyers, they're the real criminals. And then they take these British Navy sailors just who are getting drunk and having a good time and partying, and they beat them up and they taser them and they humiliate them and they strip search them. They make them take their clothes off, and then these American police officers laugh at these naked British sailors, and they make these naked British sailors bend over, spread their butt cheeks in prison, and then they strip search these British Navy sailors and they laugh at them. This was embarrassing to the British government. This was embarrassing to the British Navy. No wonder the British Navy is not doing too much to help America right now. Like no, and then America expects the British Navy to defend America in the ocean. No wonder these Russian nuclear submarines are so easily able, stealthily able to sneak up on Americans right now. No wonder why the Russians are dominating the ocean. No wonder why Russian submarines and Chinese nuclear submarines are so easily dominating the ocean right now. Why would the British Navy want to help the United States after the American police officers are going around embarrassing and beating up British Navy sailors? That's like so. And if this is the way America treats their own allies, Britain was supposed to be an ally of the United States. If this is the way America treats their own allies, no wonder why America has all these enemies. If this is the way America treats their own allies, no wonder why the United States has all of these enemies: Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, the whole Middle East, Cuba. All of these people are mortal enemies of the United States. No wonder. So the American police, they're thugs. The American police are criminals. The American police, they beat up, they don't just do it to British sailors. The American police are thugs and they beat up Canadian tourists. They beat up Russian tourists, I'm sure. They beat up Mexican tourists. They beat up Cuban tourists. They beat up Australian tourists, even. The American police are thugs. They belong in prison. Something needs to be done about the American police because there's victims all over the world and they all want revenge. The victims all over the world, they all want revenge. They formed a big Revenge on America club. All of these victims all around the world, the Japanese victims of America, the Russian victims of America, the British victims of America, the Canadian victims of America, the Australian victims of America, the German victims of America. Like, there's so much you don't even know about. Like, this is just one article. This is just one example, but there's been many more cases. And we are only seeing this because the British government did an investigation. Only for the fact that these were British sailors that the American police did this to is the reason we found out about this. But the American police have probably done much, much worse to many people around the world. There's cases and there's incidents that you don't even know about. The American police have gotten away with doing horrendous, horrible things to people. Like, for example, many people didn't even know that a few years ago the American police raped a Japanese woman, and then the Japanese woman went back to Japan. So there's many cases of American police brutality that you don't even know about. There are many people around the world that want revenge on America. And they secretly want revenge on America and they silently, the quiet ones are the ones you have to watch out for, right? So there's many people around the world who want revenge on America. This is just one case. This case of these British sailors, this is just one case. But there's been many cases where American police officers have beat up innocent people and gotten away with it. And if Americans don't start arresting the bad Americans, if good Americans, if the good Americans don't arrest the bad Americans, if good Americans don't arrest the bad American police officers, if good Americans do not arrest the bad American police officers, well, let's just say I'll tell you what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen, okay? What's going to happen? I'll tell you what's going to happen if American